And we are ready. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all again. We are going to be doing Back to Basics Part 2 today. We had a lot of interaction and saw that a lot of people liked the Back to Basics Part 1. So we will be continuing onward with Back to Basics Part 2. And everyone, always, if you have any questions pertaining to anything Bluebeam review, not pertaining just to Back to Basics, feel free to ask in the Q&A area or in the chat feature. And for those of you on the YouTube land, feel free to use the chat in there as well. Our DJ CJ is going to be monitoring that. And second to that as well, if you're watching the recording, feel free to leave in a comment. We will be monitoring those as well throughout the recording in terms of later on, not instant, but let's hop into review and start our Back to Basics Part 2. So Jason, do you have an idea of where we should start, or do you want me to take that?
Yeah, so last week we did Back to Basics Part 1, and we went over some of the basics of, review. Even though most of us are using it daily or thinking about using it daily, there's still these little tips and tricks that you might have wished you've known when you were first using the software. So that's where we're at today. We had gone through some of the measurements, we'd gone through some of the tool sets, we've gone through some of the properties. Today we were talking about possibly jumping right into the studio and showing some of the things that people might want to have set up in there as sort of the basic function. And then
we're going to do studio for Back to Basics Part 3.
Oh, that was Part 3. Ooh, you just gave it away. So maybe there will be a Part 3. So Part 2 then, we should probably talk about measurements.
Yes, and custom tool sets. Custom columns, right? So we'll be continuing onward to the markups list. But let's start first with the custom tool sets and what advantages we have utilizing some of these. I'm going to go to my panel and just open up an old set. And we haven't talked too much about pinning these either. I did talk about how it's great that you can select a folder to go to somewhere from here as well. So you don't have to go to the file open. But I love to pin these things, especially for what Jason and myself do. We do demos a lot, teaching people how great review is and how it could be a good asset for them to have. And I like to pin things so I can quickly grab old documents. So pinning documents is an easy task. You just can go to your recents and you can reorganize your way your recents are being displayed as well. So from recents here, you can go over to the little by something like by date, by folder, excuse me. So you can go to the by folder area. You can go to the most accessed PDFs. Then from there, you can also go to access history. So if you wanted to look back, I clearly cleared my recents back in April. So you can clear your recents by right clicking and saying clear all recents. So these will all be removed. That does not mean your pinned items will be removed, just your recents searched for items. But going back to by date, I can right click on one. You can also pin one here. You can go to here and say pin file, or if you're pinning it, meaning it's going to stay in its native storage area. So as you can see my file extension here where it's stored, the most recent folder that it's in will be populated up here. And then that allows you to click to that folder. And if there's anything else in there, you can grab it, or whatever you pinned from that folder will be displayed here. Now, this only pins things in its folder order natively in Windows. Now, if you want things to be pinned together that aren't stored together, so as you look at this one's stored in the folder of sheets under my exercise documents here. But then I go over to this one. Let's do this one. This one is actually stored in something different. Or this one. This one's stored in the IAR's thermal air systems slip sheet folder, but they're all stored together. So from right here, they're able to be stored in a category. And in order to do that, you're going to right click. You can say pin, but it needs to be either new category or an existing category. So even though they're not stored in the same folder in File Explorer, they are now stored together visually so I can grab them in an area. So more convenient. You're going to say something, Jason?
The category feature is something that I learned just recently, and I think that's super handy. because like Michael mentioned, sometimes we're doing training or demos, and it's nice to have everything all in one spot, and then you can organize things. So if you were using this on a project, maybe you've got your contact list, maybe you've got all your specs in one category, maybe you've got your shop drawings in another category. You can really fine tune that to really make it fast and easy to access, the PDFs that you're in most often.
Exactly. And that's a great, again, pin feature. I love the ability to go through and just click on a folder and then go back and navigate maybe a little bit further, so then I don't have to go file open, or just clicking on a specific file that I want to get access to. And if maybe you're working in a project and they're not stored together, that would be used for a category, right? Because they're not in that same folder structure, allowing you to just grab from the specific category if you wanted to go through and grab there. But again, that's just right clicking. So I'm just going to go through and open up a sheet here. And we didn't touch too much about saving specific markups to a tool sets last week. I do recommend using the ones already out of the box. Where's my Windows tab here? I'm going to put this in the chat. Extensions review has a great selection of pre-created tool sets. So if you click that, you can go down here. Jason and myself always recommend starting from here as well, or creating your own, completely up to you, depending on your level of knowledge. And I will put this for everybody to see. There we go.
There we go. Right up in the chat, we see that link there. So you can go download custom tool sets, custom profiles, and custom stamps.
Yes, which I have a ton of ones available here that I've gone through and used. But let's go through and talk about customizing our tool sets. Now, there's two different ones that already come from out of the box that you want to be kind of monitoring. There's the recent tools here. Be aware when you're using recent tools and you close out a review removes any of your recent tools. So any of your recent markups, tools being markups, they will be removed. Then my tools are where you want to store things if you're going to reuse them, create your own, or if you want more of a hotkey associated to them. So these aren't just numbers helping you organize, which they still do help you organize number-wise, but they're actually hotkeys. So if I go over here and press 2 for this highlight on my keyboard, it's going to bring up the highlight command. So again, hotkeys associated to them. You can also move these around just by left clicking, holding, and dragging if you're trying to renumber the order, saying, hey, actually, you know what, I'm going to only use, I don't want to have to press 10. I just want to press 2. You can reorder these around to help you use your hotkeys more efficiently. And again, see, I recently used a markup and now it's available for my selection. Were you going to say something, Jason?
Yeah, so I like my tools and I like putting things in there, but sometimes those numbers are really hard to see. Can you show that slider thing down at the bottom to make them get a little bigger?
Yep, so there's the triangle down here, and this works for also thumbnails as well, by the way, for your sheet sizes. So if you want to make this a little bit more efficient so you can see things, you can start dragging it up and it will give you larger ones. And again, any of these panels, like we talked about last week, you can unattach them. So you can go detach and you can have these on a second screen. So if you're one of those folks that has a lot of these, I guess it won't let me drag by the corner right here. Cat and mouse.
It is a little finicky. I noticed that when you're trying to drag those corners, but
yeah, there we go. So then
if nobody was watching, you'd get it the first time.
Yeah. So then you could have this on a complete second screen, right? Gives you more real estate. But right click, you can then say attach left, drag it back up to where you want it to be. Okay, so I'm going to bring it down to more of a happy medium here. Let's talk about specific markups. We can go through and customize just a couple. Let me just do a revision cloud. Let me add some hatch patterns to it, a hatch of this, and then let me create accounts. Now, for those of us that didn't know, if we're more in the estimating field, there's two great ways to get counts. There's an actual, it's labeled as a count, which itemizes, which itemizes every instance. Wait, I think I'm saying it backwards. Whereas sequence, it actually numbers them visually but it does itemize every instance place, where the other one, count, it groups them all together as a singular count, but it gives you a total of those running counts. So sequences have the little play button next to them, and they visually count upward, right? But down in the markups lists, they actually put each single one as they're being placed. Whereas a count, as you're placing your count, it won't let me place that count. As I go through and place my count here, they're grouped together. They're not incrementing forward, but they are giving me a total count. So there's two differences. So for estimization, I think I'm saying that right. Right?
Perfect.
Okay.
That's such a cool little trick you got there.
But so be aware that yes, sequences are great. That's more of a visual representation of something, but count is actually itemizing and grouping them together as you're placing them as a singular one. But I'm going to go through and make just a custom one for all of us that are wanting to know, hey, Mike, I'm trying to create my own. I'm going to do a count. I prefer count. You can do a sequence too if you wanted to, but I'm just going to go through and make this my count with a line like that. And now that I've made it, you have it over here in your recents. And again, your recents and any of your tool sets display in two different modes. It is properties mode or drawing mode before they become counts or sequences. Now, properties mode is exactly the same exact properties, and you can see it has a little revision cloud in black and then the actual color of what the markup's going to be. So it's going to copy the same exact properties as I'm going forward. If I hit enter, that's the same exact properties. But if I want a same exact image of whatever I originally made, you need to go to drawing mode, and that's either double clicking the markup that you previously made, or you can right click on the markup and say properties mode. So again, it switches between both of them. Now I need to add that one to my tools or a tool set. It doesn't have to be my tools because it can't be created from recent tools. You do not get the option to right click and say count. You cannot create a sequence. Reason why you can't create a sequence is because there's no value in here to create a sequence from. Right. Yes, and sequences can become from text boxes. They can be a shape, but it has to be some type of text value to change the integer value. You gonna say something, Jason?
Michael, I'm gonna stop you right there. So for those who want to play along with us and create some of your own tool sets, but maybe you don't want to mess with things, can you show how we're going to create our own tool set? Maybe, Michael's favorites or, morning coffee review tools or something like that, so people have a place to put them besides my tools?
Yeah. So you can export these tool sets out as .btx files, and you can create your own. Now, in order to do that, it's going to be up here at the top from the top menu drop down. So you click here, you'll see all of my active ones that I currently have active with the check boxes next to them, but you're going to go to manage tool sets. Now from the manage tool sets box or dialog box that populates here, you'll see all of your available. You can deselect these so they're not displaying. You can also see if they show in all profiles. So if you remember last week, back to basics numero uno, they don't show, and we were going and we covered profiles. So these ones will show in all of the profiles that we've created. Now these ones will only show up in the specific profile that we are in. So be aware, profiles play a huge part in how you're creating your review interface, because it also plays into the fact of here with tool sets and custom columns in your markups list. But from here, you can go through and say add. Now you can create a new one, or if there's an existing path, maybe you had an existing one that you wanted to path through to bring into here, you could. And then you can say, is it going to display now? Now, again, that just means it's going to be checked and it's going to show up here. Is it going to show in all profiles? So like we talked about before, am I going to see in every single profile as I rotate through them? Now, a relative path is the good old design environment. I like to use a reference of like Xrefs or something like that. If the folder gets moved, is it still going to find the file itself or not? So relative path should most oftenly be selected. Would you ever say there should be a time where you shouldn't select relative path, Jason?
That's one that I always sort of struggle with, since we don't really use a server thing here. I don't test it very often, but relative usually is the safe bet, because that's going to ignore the drive letter, correct?
Yep.
But follow the same sort of Autodesk and Windows rules.
Mm-hmm. So it's completely up to you. I always just recommend better be safe than sorry, and just keep it checked. Hit okay. This is where it's going to save natively. Now these are all your local ones. This is just the default location of all of your tool sets. These are saved out as .btx files. Whenever I do my demos and trainings, I like to reference these tool sets as an Allen key set. They live in your toolbox, which is your tool chest over here in the panel. And then your markups are these specific Allen keys in the tool set in the toolbox. So great analogy. If you ever have any questions about it, feel free to ask. But these are great. These are where they're stored. You can attach them to a file too if you're trying to have someone else follow a specific type of markup that you've created. You can go through and attach these. They can double click it and go through there. But okay, so that's how you create your new one, your title. It'll populate here, and then you will see it over here and you can dump things to it. So I will just do training 2.0 for adding new things to it to help show everyone as well. So I'm going to left click, hold, and drag it to a new tool set. Now, Jason, what's the other way I can add from here to a tool set?
If you go to the properties, so if you select it and then go to your properties, you can find it that way. So there's actually 3 ways. So if you go to your properties down at the bottom, you can add to tool chest and then select your training 2.0, or you can right click on the markup itself and go to add to tool chest.
Yep. There's always multiple ways to do things in review, which is great. And I'm adding mine to my training 2.0. And I also have a little symbol here. So if anyone has a question about this, we will get into it. But basically, these are set to scale. Now from over here, they're also in symbol mode, which is great. So if you're going through and creating accounts, you can add some data to these. So I've selected my specific one, and now I want to create a count item for it. Now the icon does change. So it's going to show the image, and it's going to show a little, what is that, 5 with a strike through it, and then the actual measurement on the top side of it. That's how you know it's a count. Sequences have a play button next to them right here. Let me give a little wave for that so you can see it. And this one has a little icon down here. And these are being displayed in a different mode. So if I select the gear symbol specific for this tool set, these are displayed in detail mode or symbol mode. So detail mode is preferred when you're doing some type of punch walkthrough or cost estimation. And I'm going to change the subject. Subject is a huge part in doing the markups list, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And itemizing counts through the markups, but what are you trying to itemize, right? Let's just name this revision cloud. We'll name it MCR. We'll just name it MCR. And a label, because you can't put comments on counts, the label is going to be the significant matter here. We'll just name this
blobby things. Blobs.
We'll just name it dark roast.
Oh man, I need more coffee.
Morning coffee reviews MCR, by the way, and then dark roast is going to be the label. We'll also duplicate this one just so we have a little bit different example here, and we'll name it light roast. So we can see what I'm doing with this itemized count. It'll still show up in the MCR subject when we go back through and talk about more of the markups list in a little while. So all right, I'm setting myself up for success.
And then duplicate that again. Do medium roast, but go slower for that duplicate, because that's pretty cool. That's one of those things that not a lot of people know exist there. And what does it mean? Are you duplicating the whole tool set? Are you duplicating the tool? That's a really neat way to make subtle differences in those tools that you're creating, and then you can go edit them after a while. Pretty cool.
Yep. So I just right clicked on the one I wanted to duplicate, and it created an exact copy of it. I'm going to put here. If I could spell today. And then I'm going to actually change the properties of this. So if I right click Well, I need to select it, because if I placed it and then went back and tried to re-edit it, that's not the workflow you want to do, because it's editing one outside of it, meaning the instance that you placed. So you need to select it, hit the edit button here, sorry, the properties button here, and then you can go through and make any changes that you want, and it won't let me do the appearance because it's already a count. But let's say it was something different and you wanted to go through and do that, you had the ability to go and do that, because you want to change whatever it is prior to it being placed. So that way, otherwise, if you try to change colors, like for this instance here, you want to do it to the overall one versus the one that you're just playing of the instance. Because if I go here, place it, right? This is the 16th. So if I go here and place it, and then I change the colors if I wanted to, it's not going to change these colors. It's going to be the instance that it was. Sorry, I changed things that weren't even existing there. So it's changed this one, but it didn't change into my tool set because it's changing the instance that was placed.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it did shrink, for everyone asking, because I had the selection of it and I applied the scale. So I set a scale specific to these tool sets, so I don't have to go through and recount these, because basically the training I was doing for this specific one was trying to space plan a little bit of things being placed. But okay, so we've created these. I'm going to go through and just start placing them just to show. So when we get back over to the itemized list, we can do that. Now, another little helpful tip with these tool sets, you can create a legend from anything in the markups list by selecting, like using Control or Shift to do a bunch of them. But you can also do it in the tool sets. And the great thing about the tool set is whenever an item is placed from that specific tool set, it goes to that specific legend on that specific page. So from here, I can go say, hey, let me create a legend here. I'm going to go and place it up here at the top right. I've created a new legend. It's going to be named the exact same thing here. So when I go back and say legend, it's training 2.0. And at any point when I add a new markup here, it's getting added to the already created legend from the specific tool set, because this is the tool set it's pertaining to. Now I saw something come up in the Q&A.
Yep. So the question is, can you show how to make that tool set to scale?
Yes. So, yes, I'm going to show you how to set the scale. You're going to be the one that's going to make the markups to scale. Does that make sense? Okay. So I also, by the way, if you ever need some literature specific to this versus a video, if you're if it's easier for you to read something to retain the information versus me visually showing you, check out our blogs. We did page scale and viewports, and we also did set to scale blog specific to these. So you can always look at our resources if you're ever wondering how to do this. But you're going to go through and you're going to create your specific markup. You're going to sketch it to scale because you're drawing it at whatever scale it needs to be at. So you're going to go through and create whatever type of markup you want. Yes, you took the time to do it. We'll just say this is it. This looks like a diving, if I remember. This is the diving symbol when you go scuba diving. But anyways, if I've grouped these together, select it. I'm holding Shift to select multiple. I'm going to right click and I'm going to group them. Boom. When the right click, add it to training 2.0. These are already set to scale, but I will show you how to set it to scale. You say symbol, then you're going to be going and saying set to scale. All you're doing is you're telling review what size you drew these at. So whatever size you wanted these to be at. So if I drew this, I knew it was set to a specific scale at 3/4 of an inch equals a foot. So then at any point when I drop these in at the set scale, this is 1/16 of an inch equals a foot, it's going to actually have these populated. Sorry, I don't know why that took a little bit, but populated at the set scale.
That's such a neat trick.
Yes, you continue. Sorry.
So when you have that scale, so let's say you have everything set up for, I got to think architectural terms, a 1/4 inch scale, and then you need to switch to a 1/2 inch scale. Is there a way to change the scale of everything in there at one time, or do you have to go recreate a different tool set?
No, you can reset the scale. So the best example is to draw them almost 1-to-1, right? Because then it's easier. It'll just fluctuate with the scale. But yes, you can reset these. You can say, hey, you know what? This is actually supposed to be 1/8 of an inch scale. And then when you go back to replace, it changes. So it won't update the one that's already placed because it was 2 scale originally placed. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's the trick right there. If you're setting these up for 2 scale, try to draw them 1-to-1, because that will make them more versatile depending on the types of scales of PDF files that you're working with.
Yeah, and some folks are like, well, what's the best way to create these? I have a bunch of details in AutoCAD. Great, that's even better because you just print them out at whatever scale they're supposed to be at, the viewport wise, right? And then you can just trace over them, boom, done, and then you set the scale. So that's a great way of doing that as well. So just be aware. You can always come back and double check your scale measurements because guess what? We can do a measurement feature in here, right? So you can come back and say, was that actually 2 scale or not? So you can come back through and measure your specific markups. And if you can't grab markups like I can't currently, it's probably because you need to go to review, under preferences, and you need to go to grid and snap to markup, and enable that feature. And you can come back to here and you can snap to your markup content. And that's definitely, that's a large sync. I mean, I was going to say you can't make that, but
it's like a Roman bath.
You can. Yeah. So yeah.
Pretty cool.
Any questions from anybody out there?
Question, how did you just do that? So you just move the text away from the dimension. Since we're on these back to basics, we're always trying to throw in these little tips that have become almost second nature to us as we mess with the software so often. But moving that text like that is not something that a lot of folks know about.
Yes, and we did this last week too. Whenever it gets too busy, you just have to make sure you're not hitting the node, because then the node is going to drag it up or down, right? Which you don't want to do. I mean, maybe you do. You want to be around the text area. You're going to hold shift left click. So I'm left clicking and holding my left click and still holding shift at the same time. And I'm dragging it out. Do you still have to hold shift at the same time? Nope, you don't have to hold shift at the same time. You just have to left click hold. The shift is just to grab it, and you can drag it out.
Pretty cool.
Okay. No other questions?
No other questions currently.
All right.
Go ahead.
Let me know if I'm going too fast to audience, because that happens sometimes.
Sometimes that's great.
Couple of Joe.
We got a thank you there from Jamie. That text move, I've been struggling with that. Thank you. That is absolutely one of those struggle points. And the same thing happened with me with the area, when you have an area call out, because it's so hard to move. You can't do anything with it. That's where those shift modifiers come to save the day.
Yeah, so when you're using this, right, and you're like, great, there's text in the room for the room label or something, and you're like, how do I get that out?
But if you try to move it without holding down shift, it moves the whole thing, and then it becomes a mess. So, and control both do cool things inside a review. So always try them to see what sort of results you get.
Agreed. It's not a box anymore. But alrighty, so now that we have these created, we created a legend very quickly. You can also modify the way your legend looks. This took me a while. I remember when I first started, I'm like, that's great, it has some information. But what you can do is you can go up to columns up here, and this is in my dynamic options bar, or over here on the right, you can always click the properties. I prefer to just go up here. You can then go click the drop down from columns, and you can edit it. You can also change the title here, by the way. So if you wanted to not have the same title, whatever your tool set is, that's completely fine. You can show it here, or you can say no title. So again, this little area over here of your legend can be modified the way you want it to look. So I'm going to hit edit columns here. And now I can go through and actually select which columns I wanted to show specifically for this at the beginning. So you can change the way and modify the way this looks as well. You can also change the cell in terms of margin and the font format for it as well. Then this is place again. As I start going through and making new ones, it'll start itemizing for those ones being placed. So as they're being placed, they will be placed in the information associated to it as you start placing new ones that are already created in there. But okay, you can also do that same feature by going to your markups list, selecting the markups that you want to put in a legend, right click, and you can say legend and either add them to an existing one or create a new legend here as well.
No way. I did not know you could do that.
Yes, so you can go back to here. You can even granularly select with Control versus Shift. And say, hey, you know what, those should be added to this legend, or create a new legend.
Oh, see, I was always doing it one at a time. I never held down Control. See, again, as we were talking, Shift and Control, they're not just Windows handy things. They do some cool stuff in here too. So
yes,
awesome.
And that's great for deleting things, which some people do go through and re-delete things, which is completely fine. That's their workflow. You could do the same thing to let Shift, Control, right click, and then oops, and then delete. So that's another way to delete things. It's also a great way to add a layer. So little hints in the background. I had a client ask, I want to import and export markups, but I only want to do it for the statuses marked complete. So this is for more of reviewing a revision on something, right? So someone went through, they made some markups, said, hey, these things need to change. Great, the designer went through, made the changes, but then went back and marked statuses on the markups as completed or not completed. But they only wanted the not completed ones to be transferred over to the new set. How can I do that? Because when you import or export markups, it's all of the markups that are on the sheet set, right? Regardless of how I go through and filter things here with this lovely filter feature. By the way, I'm on review 20, and I think it's review 20.2.3.
That's the latest and greatest right there.
And I'm in extreme. So if you're on 18 and below, your filter is a little bit different. And if you're on, I believe it's 19, they changed this filter as well to give you multiple filters within columns. So I highly recommend being at the latest and greatest, but it's completely up to you. This gives me multiple filters per list. But again, going back to using layers, I can move these like the multi-control like this to a set layer. So I can say layer, create new. I would just say complete, right? We're just acting as if these were on a status of complete. Because then you can go to your layers here and say, don't show those markups. And guess what? Don't export those markups. So then only the markups that you wanted to are going to be brought out and then imported back into a new PDF. So little handy tip that I was showing a client the other day because they were asking for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a great tip, and one that I always overlook. So I'm going to mention that in a training later today. So with that, we're diving into the markups list. Now we've teased it a little bit throughout this series, but since we're talking about importing and exporting markups, you want to go ahead and cover that part?
Yeah, so I have some markups that I can import, and going to the markups list, it's down below, and this can be moved anywhere. It's a panel, so if you wanted to have it on a second screen, a third screen, or anything like that, you can. But right here, you have the markups list dropdown, which is very important. I'm going to deactivate my filter. I'm going to hit the dropdown here. I have the markups part from my dropdown selection here, and then I can go over here and say import or export. I want to import markups. I already have some. Now, most of you don't get this window selected. The reason why I have the window selected is because I was creating a dashboard. By the way, doing a webinar this Thursday on dashboard. So if you want to come in and check it out to learn more about them, please show up there. But I'm going to hit open from disk. Huh?
I highly recommend checking that out because dashboards are cool, and Michael's the man to show you.
Thank you. So I'm going to go to here, go to my review. I have some exercise documents that I'm going to import comments, and I'm just going to do all comments here. And it brings all of your comments. Now the caveat, by the way, it inserts the exact same point. So if your designer moved the viewports, you're just going to, a lot of people try to move one by one, but just use the shift feature, right? Select all, and then you can just re-grab one and try to get it back to the, oops, not that. Try to get it back to the same location of where it was before. But it imports markups, by the way, wherever they were placed and all over each sheet assigned to those specific ones. So that's how you import. Same thing with export. And again, if you don't want things to export out specific to what those markups were, use layers. Don't delete them because you want to at least have a record of things, right? So no need to go through and delete them. Just move them to a layer and then you're good to go.
Yeah, this is one of those questions that comes up where, especially for those who are doing plan review. So we did a bunch of markups. We passed them off to the drafter, the designer, to make those changes, and then they gave us something else. How do we verify what has been done and what hasn't been done? And there are a few different ways to do that inside of review. We can overlay documents. We can compare documents. But importing and exporting markups is a clever way, especially if you're importing them and putting them on a layer. You can toggle it on and off to verify that things have been done. And then, of course, we have the status option, which is something that we don't see currently displayed in that markups list. Maybe that's a good segue to go to where we need to go next.
Yeah, so yeah, and my columns have been rearranged. I didn't reset my settings, obviously, but I can go through and say status, right? So I can check the status of specific markups. Now, there is a caveat to statuses in a session, and we'll talk about that in sessions. So if you do have questions about it, please hold off till
next week.
You see our next video. I already ruined the surprise, so yeah, next week. And we'll talk about how this statuses work in sessions, because sessions does limit things within the specific session that you're in. So we'll talk about those and what you can and cannot do. But you can set up specific statuses. So you, again, anytime in the markups list, you can select a markup. It's going to highlight where that markup's been made, and you can go in and see what's happening there. Now, statuses, you can mark a running record report of things that are happening, like completed. Hey, this has now been completed, and it is marked at a specific date. This is great for when you're exporting out summary reports, which you can do in a markups list report, either attached as appended, and it actually jumps you to where the markup is. So if you have a 100-page document set, and you're like, well, where are all these markups? Guess what? It has a hyperlink. It'll bring me directly to where that markup's placed. Or you could do a CSV summary. Maybe you are getting area calculations, cost estimate, and you're doing it all here natively in review. You can export it out to a CSV, which is great as well. If you have Extreme, you can actually link those to a CSV file. So as things update, like area sizes, and you're trying to get a tile estimate or something like that, it'll update automatically in review in Excel as well. And that's one thing we're going to be doing at some point, is another one specific to those linking methods.
Yeah, these morning coffee reviews, just since I see new names and faces here on our morning coffee review this morning, sometimes we do back to basics. Sometimes we do more advanced things. Sometimes we do more, off the wall intermediate things. So if there's something you're curious about, certainly let us know, and we'll add that to our list of future topics. Or, of course, as always, just ask. We will completely deviate from whatever we were intended to talk about, and discover new things or discuss new topics as we're at it too.
Yep, great, thanks, Jason. And then, so as these are running, they're running statuses at the time that they were imprinted. And guess what? You also have the ability to do some more modification, which is a great feature. Instead of having your end user say, hey, look at it's done, great, highlighted. What you can do is actually change the color. So going over here to these little slide bars, there's this thing called Manage Status. And this is where you add new statuses if you wanted to. So then I can go through and say, I'm going to add something. I'm not going to really. I'm just going to select an existing one. And when it says completed here, I'm going to modify the completed selected one. You can even have it change the text for whatever text has been associated to the specific markup. Like this says shaft location requirement, per tenant layout. I could say done or something. I don't know. But I'm just going to change the color, hit OK. So now when it's marked completed, now when this one's marked completed, it's actually going to change the color of it. Yes, you can double mark completed because it's just a running status of things that have been placed. You can then hit export as a PDF summary report. Now, there are some settings in here. However you show it here or filter out is how your PDF summary will be reported. Or you can override how you've filtered things out by going into here and saying which columns you want to display, which filters you want to show as well. Like, should it start with subject, right? What subject is it going to just show? So for this instance, I don't want to show all of these. So I'm going to deselect all. I just want to show the architect because I'm specific to what I was having there. Great, thank you. And it's going to do subject, ascending, and what's the output? So I do prefer this append with hyperlink. You can do it as a separate export. That's completely fine. Just be aware you don't get this hyperlink feature I'm going to show you next. Another great thing to talk about here is the padding. So the padding is specific to, you see the markup wherever it's placed, and then you see the outside of the drawing. So the more greater you have, the more of the outside of the drawing you're going to see, less of the markup becomes very small. So I'm going to do a 50-50 here. So I'm going to bring this down. You could type into, and you don't have to hold the click button like I'm doing, but completely up to you. And then you have different specific templates. So you could create a company template. That's how these things should be exported, which you can then import here. You can even insert page break per specific subject. So maybe you just wanted one subject on each page. You could do that as well. But I'm just going to do that, and I'm going to say open. It's going to be appended to the back anyways. You can save this configuration and load these configs. So if you want everyone to be on the same page in the company, you could easily save your configuration that you've taken the time to do and then load the configuration. So I'm going to hit OK. It's going to print out 12 because there's 12 specific markups. Let's check out what's happened. So again, I can see who the specific subject was. I can see the padding. Again, the greater, the more you're going to see of the exterior of the drawing and a smaller specific because it's zoomed out of the markup. But down here, I have my running statuses. And if you're ever wondering where this markup was made, you can left click on it because again, the hyperlink feature was selected and appended. So it brings you directly to where it was made on the sheet itself.
Oh, I love that feature. That's one of my favorites, is that ability to figure out where they were. Because as you mentioned, if this was a 100-page plan set, sometimes you don't know where all those comments are, and being able to click right there makes it faster for you to go and make those adjustments as needed.
Yep. And if your filter feature doesn't help you out as well in saying you only want to look for specific markups because it grays out your markups that aren't being filtered, so meaning only the things that are filtered are showing up, you can actually do no markup. So you can select this little I button with the line through it. I don't want to see anything. Just like you can do with line weights. It's almost the same type of feature where you do want to see line weights or you don't want to see line weights. You can do that for markups, hide markups, or don't hide markups.
Neat trick.
Alrighty.
Another underutilized feature is that hide markups.
Yeah.
All right, so we got a question here. Do you have to have the plan set and markup PDF for it to hyperlink to the comment?
So you can hyperlink yourself. You do have to have it appended for the hyperlink feature to automatically work because you have to point to a folder location if you're doing it elsewhere, which it won't do for you. But you can do it yourself. So you would have to go through and use hyperlink just like you can with any hyperlink feature. And you would select where it's going to hyperlink from. So from here to here, and then you need to point to where it's going to open because now it's in that summary, right? Or in that PDF. So the append with hyperlink feature is giving you that automatic hyperlink. You don't have to. You can just create your own summary, and then you have to go back and assign where that selection is going to be for it.
So with that, since we're talking about, another question. Is the hyperlink for markups an extreme feature only? No. That works for standard, CAD, or extreme. Good question, though. Now, one of the things we're just talking about with hyperlinking, if we were to export markups and import markups, so once we had imported some, then the hyperlink would still work, right? Because it knows where it is.
Well, you would create a new summary anyways, right?
Right.
Yeah. The summary is attached to that specific PDF. It wouldn't hyperlink. If you opened up the old PDF set, it would hyperlink it to that current PDF set. It wouldn't bring you to the new PDF set. Okay. You have to create a whole new PDF summary.
Right. Perfect. All right,
and the other hyperlink feature, if you were wondering, the only specific hyperlink feature for Extreme is the batch hyperlink feature. So just be aware of that. That's where the Extreme differentiates between standard. You can always use the lovely little singular hyperlink feature, but the batch one is super slick and quick to use as well. So again, if you ever have any questions of which review should you get, feel free to reach out to us. We'll suggest some for you as well.
And there is also the really nice breakdown on the Bluebeam website that you can access through the web tab here. And it will show you all the differences. But we did do a morning coffee review a couple of weeks ago that went through those version differences. Of course, this session and all of our previous sessions are on our YouTube channel, ATG USA. Feel free to go take a look at that, or we can bring it up again in a future episode.
Yep. And so back to this filter thing, I don't remember when it was. I think this was 19, to be honest. But
it's either 19 or 20.
Don't quote me on that. There's my little header saying which one it was. But from here, you can filter. Now it's multi-filter. So when you go through and start to filter things, it's not just specific. So let me go back to the architect. So I'm seeing cloud and architect because I've selected both, or just the architect. So this is a huge upgrade to what they did in review. Before, it was just one little funnel, and you could only funnel select, meaning filter by one specific column, which was all right. But now what I could do is I can filter out by saying, hey, I want to see the architectural comments. Great. Which ones do you also want to filter out by? Just complete it. So now I'm adding multiple filters to get to what I really want to get. Yes, you can use a search feature if you wanted to, but I want to filter out multiple ones, right? And guess what? So you've done this before and you're opening up another set. Hey, Mike, can I also do the same filter on something else? You can save these. So there's these little slash bars here, which is the opposite way of the custom markup columns here. These almost look like a DJ stand, like the slide bars, But anyways, you can select this and you can save these. So you can save the filter so you don't have to recreate these filter selections. To use later on as well. So this is a great upgrade that they did in review. I highly suggest using the save feature, using the multi-filter for them as well.
I love that ability to save. And as I usually say with my trainings and stuff, is that most everything that you're doing in review can be saved and exported. So you can share them, you can import them if you get a new computer. If you're using, a office computer and a home computer, like you can make them match really, really well. Bluebeam has really thought this out with the review product.
Yes, but I did have a question from a client. You cannot match this profile to a legacy version, which is 17 and below. So just be aware of that. Yeah. So if you're on a legacy version trying to change somebody new that's on 2020, you can't make their profile look like yours. It's stuck with the profile of the UI because the UI does a dramatic change from 17 and above. You can also reorganize these columns. So just left clicking and holding, you can drag them around. You'll see a little indicator right here like this saying this is where I'm going to be dragged and dropped to. So you do have the ability to reorganize the way your markups lists look. You can also sort by specific data over here by dropping it down, then clicking that column, and it's going to sort by the status. Or it's going to sort by the subject, as we've seen here. So just clicking these specific tops of the columns allows you to reorganize your information there. Now, how much time do we got?
We got about 10 minutes.
Do we want to talk about creating custom columns?
Yep.
Real quick.
That would be a pretty good segue since we're on that part.
Okay. So let's say we were trying to get a cost estimate for flooring. That's the one I love to use majority of the time. We have this area measurement. I probably would have renamed my area measurement and named it what it's going to be so I can reuse these markups later on. And I was like, where is it? That's because it's in a layer. That's why it's highlighted when I selected it. It's on completed. Is it going to be displayed? There it is. Okay. So now that I see it here, I want this one to be tile because I'm trying to get a cost estimate specific to tile that's been placed, or carpet, or whatever you are going to use it as. So I'm going to name this tile here. I'm trying to understand that this is, not trying to understand, I know this is 742 square feet, but I want to get a cost estimate specific to that. It moved, I shouldn't have done that, but okay. So I need to create a cost value for it, right? So we're going to say it's $2 a square foot. But how do I do that? I need to go up to markups list, column, and from here I have manage columns. Then I need to go through and create a specific custom column. Then I'm going to add this custom column, and I'm going to name it cost. Then from here, what type of cost value is it going to be? A check mark, choice, data, or date, formula, number. What type of number is it going to be? Currency. So you have a drop down for currency. What decimal places, what currency value are you going to put in here? I'm going to hit OK. And huge tip note here, save to profile. So custom columns by default save to the PDF. So when the PDF opens, if you have a review, it's going to open up a cost column. But what if you want to use it later on? Save it to your profile, and maybe save it to a specific profile like estimation or something, right? Estimates, so that you're not having them collide with other columns when you're opening up markups. It's always best to have the profile specific to what you're doing, but not too specific, right? So we don't want to make it for specific cost estimates. It should be all estimates, but here we go. Then I also need to create a total, because the total, I don't know if it'll show up automatically if the cost in there, but we need a total because we're going to take the cost times the area to it. So we need to do a cost total. And this is going to be a formula, and it's going to be cost. Ooh, what happened? It's going to be cost. So now I see cost here. Just typed C in, and then it brought up the expression for it. Then it's going to be times, and it's going to be times area.
Boom. And that times is just an asterisk. So this expression can do, addition, subtraction, division, multiplication, and percentages. I think it's about it.
Yep. Format's going to be a currency value as well. 2 decimal places. It's going to be $. Include totals. You said you don't like to include totals?
I like the totals.
Okay. We're going to hit OK. So there's going to be a cost again, save to profile if you wanted to. And guess what? You can import and export these as well. So if you wanted to export these, you had the ability to export, give them to someone else. I'm going to hit OK. Now, there's a great feature when you're doing cost estimates specific to like a custom column like this. Every single column that is custom will be given to any markup. So if I go to over here and I select this markup and I go to the property symbol, I will now have a cost value here under custom or a cost total, right? So be aware, you can click on it and you can already assign the value to it, like $2, right? And then when I hit escape and I go back to place it and I hit this, I'll see a $2 increment value. So it's already going to give it a $2 increment value. So you could automatically have the cost value associated to it. So you don't have to keep typing it in each time you've placed one. So that's a great little tip as well. But I'm just going to go over here and say that the tile, I can type in here a cost value of $2. Then it's already going to multiply me for my cost total.
That's a pretty clever way to do it. I do it a little bit differently, but
Ooh.
I think this is beneficial because it shows what that cost per unit would be.
What's your way?
Let me show you.
Okay.
All right. So on mine, I also like to use flooring, but since I'm a civil guy, sometimes I say this could be asphalt, landscape, gravel, class 5, whatever you want. Anything you're doing an area measurement, you can do this with. So in this case, I have a floor plan. I have different colors here. And when I go to my markups list, this one has been pre-populated with my flooring. Now, I did this differently. So on Michael's, he chose to put tile. What I did is I changed the subject to flooring. So flooring is the general thing. And then from there, we have a column for material. And we have a column for total cost. So let's open those up. when I go to my custom columns, I started with a material column, meaning that this is a choice. So Michael chose number for his. I did a choice. Now under material, I can tell it be carpet, be hardwood, polished concrete, tile, bamboo, stained concrete, whatever it is. Now, if I open these up, there's also an option here for a subject. And this is where if I were to, actually, I will do this. I'm going to call this one flooring. So stained concrete has a subject of flooring. And I've given these fake numbers. I have no idea what flooring costs. I'm guessing everything has gone up. But I'll put that one as flooring. Now, when I hit OK, we see my list of choices here. I have my subject. So pay attention to the stained concrete one. When I hit OK here, I have my choice, which has that numeric value. Then I had another formula. So Michael went cost times area. I went area times material. And that material gives me that same currency. So we're doing the same thing, but this is just a slightly different because I'm using this choice dropdown. So all of my area measurements here have these different colors, and these are set to flooring. So if I can come over here and change that material at any time, change that from hardwood to carpet or from carpet to bamboo, and it will make that difference. Now, the problem with this is, and if I stretch this out, you can see my cost value here. If I come down to legend, I can also assign carpet, hardwood, and that's not appropriate, right? But you'll notice in my list here, I do not have stained concrete. If your choice is set to match your subject, you will only get these choices for that subject. So all of these are generic, but if I were to put these all on flooring, they would only show up for flooring, which means I could have another set for landscape, or I could have another set for, I don't know, whatever else, wall paint, or whatever else you're going to be using materials for. So this choice comes out pretty nice. Also, this makes it easier to manage if you did have a estimation where you were changing the dollar value from, maybe it went from $4 to $4.25. You go in there and make those adjustments, and everything else will update too. But there's so much fun stuff that you can do in these markup lists. I'd love to see somebody really push the boundaries of custom columns.
Mm-hmm.
With that, one thing we have to mention, and this is kind of a teaser for other things. If you're doing custom columns, this is a feature that is not available in studios. So if you're doing studio sessions, you cannot create custom columns inside of that. However, if they exist inside of your PDF before you upload it to Studio, that will appear there. So if you're thinking about doing different templates or anything like that, get it configured natively first, and then push it up to Studio.
Yep. Great tip, Jason.
All right, we got about a minute left here. Any other parting words before we wrap this up for today? As always, these sessions that we do are every Tuesday at 8:30. But it is now July, which means we're going to have a bonus episode on the 14th. This is going to be a Wednesday morning coffee review, and it's going to be a little later. So, Doug, this is for you, buddy. It's going to be 8:30 Pacific time. So that'll be 10:30 for us out here on the West, or out here in the middle coast or no coast. We'll be able to do that secondary one, so you don't have to get up so early for all of us, all of you guys, including you, Michael, who are in the Pacific time zone, get to sleep in a little bit.
And it'll be a different topic, by the way. So you can attend both. They're not going to be the same topic for that same week. So remember, thank you, Jamie. So remember, jump into both or do one or the other and catch up on the one that you might have missed. These are always open for any questions. So it'll be interesting to see which host has different questions about different topics. So it'll be fun to see that as well.
And as always, there'll be a questionnaire when you exit the webinar today. If you've got any ideas for future topics, type them in there. We look at that stuff. That helps us get better, so we can provide the content that you, the Bluebeam community, wants to see. So with that, we'll wrap it up. Thanks for joining us today on this day after a long weekend edition of Morning Coffee Review. We'll see you next week.
See you all next week.